生于海洋，归于海洋。1年前，人类从海中走出，如今我们用另一种方式重返大海。路止于此，海始于斯。在潮水涌动间，我们获取生命力，获取和自然共存的法则。
Hi everybody, my name is Geoff Brighty and I'm delighted to welcome you to this session to do with the Blue Hope events we've got going on this week, to be in conversation with certainly one of my heroes, adventurer and explorer Paul Rose, who has very kindly joined us on our campaign to basically help stop plastic pollution through the Blue Hope activities this week. So welcome, Paul.
Great to be here.
And thank you so much for lending your support to the Blue Hope campaign. It really means a lot to have someone like yourself with all your knowledge and experience to get behind what we're trying to do here.
Well, it's a great campaign. I'm really up for it. I got hooked when I saw the information you do for kids. Fantastic. I'm in.
Fantastic. So just to set the scene for the conversation we're going to have for everyone. First of all, anybody can ask questions. So through the Facebook Live platform, we'll be picking up questions as we go through. Before we start, I just want to just put out a few career highlights of Paul to everyone, just make sure everyone knows who we're dealing with here. Someone who is really serious about the environment and has done an awful lot to get out there and see as much of it as possible, it would seem to me. So Paul's his career history includes being base commander at the Rothera Research Station in Antarctica for 10 years, and for that he was awarded the Queen's Polar Medal. He's a mountain and polar guide, has led Greenland ice cap crossing and mountaineering expeditions. He's a professional diver, and I'm sure we're going to touch a lot on that today as we celebrate World Oceans Day. Paul was diving officer for the British Antarctic Survey and then went to work for the US Navy in their diver program. And he's still a PADI instructor, so I can imagine that Paul's going to be quite an exacting instructor if you get him on one of their courses. But Paul's also moved from the adventuring side of things to be a very well recognised speaker and broadcaster for feature programmes for the BBC, for news and for radio. And probably what brings you particularly here today, Paul, I think, is that role as a campaigner and advocate for the environment, particularly for your work on things like marine protected areas and more recently on plastics. Paul's also a former vice president of the Royal Geographical Society and a medal winner, and is the expedition leader to the National Geographic Pristine Seas expeditions. So I've managed to compress that into a couple of minutes. We could have filled 45 minutes of all the things you've done in your life. So I'm going to have to ask a question which is kind of just unique to our times, Paul, which is, so what does an explorer do when he is in lockdown?
Well, I think those of us that spend our lives at the front line on science expeditions or explorations of all kinds are used to being laid up because of bad weather or laid up because of delays in supplies at the end of a really long supply chain. So we're good at it. And my key word is being useful. There's something about being useful. So if you're laid up in a tent for a couple of weeks in really foul weather, or you're laid up on a research station, or you're at sea, and you can't do anything, all you can do is control your reaction to things. So the weather's going to pass and do its thing. But during that period, do something useful. So in the Antarctic, you go out and dig. At sea, you go on deck and make sure things are secure and do anything that is basically useful. Plan the next steps. And here at home during this period, I've done the obvious. I've become like half of humanity. I've become a semi-professional Zoom user. I've gone from, instead of exercising in the gym, I'm exercising at home. I had to buy a few more bits of gear. The balcony is now a decent gym, and I've got a pull-up bar over the door, and I promise myself every time I go through the door to the room I'm in now, I do some pull-ups. So there you go. I'm trying to keep active and learning new skills like this. I mean, we're doing a really important conference today right now, and we're doing it remotely. So yeah, be useful, learn some new skills.
And has the lockdown impacted on your immediate plans for expeditions? I'm just thinking that you would hope to go out and be out in the environment and do your work around the pristine seas, but clearly no one's travelling at the moment. So how is this impacting on your immediate plans?
Exactly, because we had to cancel the expeditions we had for the rest of this year. And normally when we plan expeditions for pristine seas, we have two parallel columns. One is the science identification. Why go to that particular part of the ocean? Looking to find, explore, and help protect the last pristine places in the ocean. So we do the scientific case, and then parallel to it is the political opportunity. When is the right time? Our overseas partners, when's it going to work for them? Our in-country partners. But now we've got a third column, and that is post-COVID recovery, because it's very uncertain, very unknown as to how any of our target destinations or any country will come back after COVID and how we're working. So we're working very hard to keep everything going remotely, and that's been a new challenge. And we've discovered that there's a lot of opportunity for establishing marine protected areas without even going there. So this is a new challenge as well. And then we're analysing the situation regularly, and we expect we'll be back at sea again early 21.
Right, so a lot of this has been put back. It was interesting listening to some of the diving community talking this morning about how they were adapting to customers coming out and doing dives. And obviously it's a very big industry, very important for conservation, and how they're having to change their approach to ensure that people are safe, but also people do actually still want to go out and do these things. But have you had to take any specific measures in planning for the post-COVID world?
Well, we have, because some countries, we expect will be, some of our targets, it will be basically unchanged. It will just be working out the risk of us traveling to get there, joining whichever vessel we are on, and the effect of managing. Is there going to be a vaccine? Are we indeed even going to be able to travel until there is a vaccine? And that's a big unknown as well. So yes, it's impacted everything we do and think about. And in a way, people like me, we're good at taking advantage of certain situations. And I see this as a real launch pad for a new way of working. Quite obviously, we're going to keep going to sea. There's a lot left to do, and we love it. That's the reason I do it. But we're also we're learning new techniques to help establish marine protected areas without even going there. So it's all new.
So it's the low carbon approach, clearly, to designation.
Yes,
of MPA.
I'll say yes. Why not?
We'll come back to MPAs in a moment. But I wanted us, for the viewers really of this session, it's just to get a sense of kind of where did this all start for you, Paul? What were the formative experiences that you had as the young Paul Rose, maybe on a beach somewhere, and about your love of the ocean? Because today is about celebrating the wonder and the importance of the ocean in our lives, globally, not just in particular marine protected areas, but it's how the entirety of the ocean works. So what was the young Paul Rose doing when he suddenly fell in love with all things marine?
Well, Geoff, I couldn't keep out of the sea. I just couldn't keep out of the water. It didn't matter what was going on. If it was rough or cold or windy, or the tide was the wrong way, or the tide was it was low tide and it was miles walking across the mud or something. When I was 8-10 years old, I just could not wait to get to the sea, whether it was a proper family holiday or just a weekend. And once I was in, I couldn't get out. You know what kids are like at the best of time. When kids are in the water having a great time, whether it's a swimming pool or the sea, they can't get out. And I was particularly unhappy about getting out. And I remember when I was about 10, we were on the south coast. I can't quite remember where it was. It might have been Weymouth. And I went out, and I, for the first time, really enjoyed not being able to see the beach anymore. There were some nice waves, and when the waves had gone through, I realised, wow, isn't it great? I don't know which way the beach is. And I was swimming, and I just was imagining, fantasizing over one day being an explorer. And I was, there I was, just, 10 years old, 10 and a bit, I think I was. And I could see, when I could see the land, I could see I was drifting along, and I was feeling little currents and cold patches and everything. And I stayed out much longer than I expected. And I eventually came to shore, and it was completely unrecognisable. I had no idea where I was. And all I could see was my mum running down the beach, ready to kill me. And that's the story of my life. Just love being in the sea. And eventually, when I was about 11, and I was watching television, I was watching Jacques Cousteau with his amazing adventures, on Calypso, his team. And Hans and Lottie Huss were making those wonderful, wonderful black and white shark films. And I went back recently and looked at some of Hans Husse's whale shark images, and they look very grainy, you know, quite compared to what we're used to today, the production values. But it was so exciting. I mean, these were real underwater heroes, but obviously being an 11-year-old boy, I was completely captured by Mike Nelson, who's a fictional character in Sea Hunt. And there he was popping up on our television screen every week, having really amazing, I guess, testosterone-fueled diving adventures. You know, he was rescuing men from flooded mines and rescuing pilots from crashed airplanes. And I remember thinking, well, I hated school at the time. I couldn't do school. And I was watching Mike Nelson and I thought, that's for me. Eventually, some years later, 1969, I did become a diver. I was so keen to get diving that I joined 2 British sub-aqua clubs, Ilford and Walthamstow. And the reason for joining 2 is one was Tuesday night and one was Thursday night, so I could double up and get my blue logbook signed off quickly and get in the sea quick. And then Easter 1969, I found myself at Chesil Cove down at Portland. Cold. I had my homemade wetsuit. I mean, as you know, Geoff, in those days we didn't buy wetsuits. You pretty much made one from a paper dress pattern, and I remember cutting it out. Obviously, I went for black, and equally obviously, I went for yellow seam tape, a la Cousteau. And getting there on those pebbles down at Portland at Chesil Cove, you know, rolling and moving on those pebbles, getting the boat in, carrying the engine and the fuel and all the heavy gear, and eventually getting in. And that first roll off the boat and looking down and seeing the weed and the life down there and all of that lovely cold water coming into my leaky suits felt just, it was a heart-stopping moment. And I still remember that feeling now. And as I'm talking to you now, I can feel that feeling. I was cold, I was alive, and I was basically living the dream. I was exploring. I was a diver, and I was there in the world's largest, least understood, least protected ecosystem on the planet. And it was just the day for me. And that was 1969. And 51 years later, every time I go for a dive, I get that feeling. There's something about being in the sea. So, yeah, so from swimming too long in the sea with no brains to 51 years later still diving, I think diving does define me, Geoff.
You've just taken me back to my first open water dive, and I can remember in the tests that we used to do for BZAC, and yeah, I'm not enjoying the cold water at all. And I dare say that many people on this watching this now probably did their initial diving maybe through PADI in slightly warmer waters like the Red Sea or in the Pacific, so haven't had that lovely baptism of being in a cold British water with no visibility. But so yes, that might still be invigorating for you. It doesn't. It's not quite the same for me, I have to say. So in terms of, obviously when you start that process of connecting with the ocean, do you remember some of the first sort of bits of biodiversity, bits of marine life that you encountered that really began to sort of just deepen that interest, as well as just being out in the ocean itself or in the coastal seas? What were the first sort of bits of biodiversity that you came across that really connected? For
me, at Chesil Cove, it was the cuttlefish. I'd never seen cuttlefish before. I had no idea what they were. But and as those of you that know the south coast of Britain and Chesil Cove in particular know that there are great groups of families of cuttlefish there. And I had no idea that when they're like that and they're in front of you and looking, there's a connection with them. They looked to me intelligent and smart, and I had no idea about cuttlefish at the time, but I instantly fell in love with cuttlefish. I found it just amazing to be quiet and still on the bottom and be with them. And of course the crabs, because there's the old outfall pipe there at Chesil Cove, and the crabs are all around there, and I found that really wonderful stuff. And then some years later, when I started to dive in warm waters, I had a wonderful experience with some dolphins in San Salvador, Bahamas. And I was a new instructor at the time. I was teaching. I was just like everybody in the States those days. I was teaching at high schools, the YMCAs. I was teaching the local police department, which was great. The local underwater recovery team. I just got the contract with the US Navy, so I was teaching diving. And I picked up some private clients. And I remember thinking, great, this is the way. Private clients, maybe there's a bit more money and you're not with a large group, although I love the groups. And we went to San Salvador, Bahamas. And there is a pod of dolphins. I'm trying to remember the name of the dolphins, but I think one of them is called Sandy. And Sandy, in those days, people would feed Sandy and became, so this one dolphin called Sandy. And after all of this work with this family, which went very well, by the way, and these were the qualification dives, I remember getting back on the boat, and the woman of the household, she was great. She instantly was a really brilliant diver. We sat there on the boat, we're having a cold beer, and I remember having a conch salad. We were there having conch salad and a cold beer in the sun, in the Bahamas. And she said, Jesus, Paul, after all this time being underwater and working with you, it's so great to dive with something intelligent. So I laughed like hell. I thought it was great, Sure, I didn't mean that, but it was fun. And we always remember those things. We remember the first, fish that we bump into, and we just remember these moments, don't we? We just have something. We have a connection with underwater life.
And it's clear that you still carry that passion today. I mean, even though you are, quote, in lockdown, in Geneva in your flat, and you've obviously built your environment to get you through all this, the passion and the drive being part of World Oceans Day is still very much with you, and you're still obviously diving now. I'm just going to go back to the point that you are still a PADI instructor. So are you still doing instructing for people? I mean, conscious that you're obviously much in demand, but I do wonder if someone one day turns up to a PADI experience and they find you're instructing them.
That'd be great.
What an exacting process that must be, because you must know literally everything there is to know about diving. But do you still get involved with that teaching?
I do as much as I can. I absolutely love being a PADI instructor. It was the making of me. My PADI instructor number is 12314, and I remember that was the smartest thing I ever did, because I didn't have much money at the time, and could I actually make a go of being an instructor? And it was a big deal. Went to Chicago, and it was Ralph Erickson who ran it down there from PADI, and I became a professional instructor. And it was the making of me, really. It was a very important moment in my life. I loved it ever since. Always been a current PADI instructor. The last few years, I haven't taught anybody formally. So now when I go back to become a current instructor, I'll have to take my recertification. I think it's like a week or so, and get up to speed. And I'm looking forward to that. It's funny you should even mention it, Geoff, because just a few days ago, I was saying to Joel, I must make sure that I'm still paying my dues, but I'm not actually a current PADI instructor. And I'm sorry I let that go, but I'm still a PADI instructor qualification. I just need to get recertified through their system so I can issue certifications. But fairly recently at the club in the Lake District in England, which I'm a member of, the Kendal British Subaquatic Club, I helped run some tri-dives in the pool there and things like that. And I absolutely love it, Geoff. And I have obviously taught people on a sort of informal basis here and there since then. I love to teach people to dive. I'm often wondered why scuba diving, where you could say sea swimming, sea snorkeling, and scuba diving, I'm serious when I think it should be on every school curriculum. I think it's the best way to learn about anything. Yeah. Physics, mathematics, human biology, physiology, nature. I think it should be in every school curriculum.
And of course, children are now diving a lot younger than they would have been. Certainly when I started my early diving period, I've stopped, so I need to get back into it. And our good friend Joe Ruxton keeps threatening to take me out and get me back in the water. But the fact that children can now dive is hugely important, so that they can feel it's accessible and not wait until they're obviously much older when they go to university, which I know is when many people started diving in my sort of era. So just moving forward then into some of the work that you're now doing in terms of the ocean conservation, and I'm interested to just get a sense of the work around pristine seas and marine protected areas. So I know that your extensive diving experience around the world has sort of led you into this more sort of advocacy kind of role. And I'd love you to share with you with us some of your thoughts about where we are on marine protected areas. We know that there's not enough. There's about 7% of the current world. I think the target is 10% by 2020. Well, maybe your virtual trips will get us there quickly without having to physically go. But we're about to head into the International Decade of the Ocean as well, which again is a real focal point for ocean conservation. So if you just give us a flavour of your National Geographic work and how that is really helping advance those protection piece for our oceans.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks, Geoff. I mean, when I look at the numbers, here we are. Where's our numbers? Here we go. We've had 30 expeditions, 22 marine protected areas, actually slightly out of date, and almost 6 million square kilometres protected. And when we look at the map, the globe there, you go, wow, that's a lot. It looks and feels like a lot, and we're very proud of all of the work we've done along with our partners and host countries to make this happen. But really, the numbers, you say it's like 7%, you're dead right, but fully protected, it's around about 2 or 3%, which is amazing when you think about it. We've got 17% of the land protected, and we're still only at very low numbers with the sea. And absolutely, Geoff, the target is 10% for 2020. But now there's a global agreement that we need to protect at least 30% by 2030. And then this is part of our waypoint on the way to half Earth, 50% by 2050. And it absolutely means that we can't afford to lose anything that is already protected at the moment. Why it's such a disaster that the US government at the moment are looking to roll back some of the protection for the Atlantic Monument that was formed up a few years ago. So we absolutely can't afford to lose any more. One of the things that's worked for us at Pristine Seas is we tend to do things in a very methodical manner. There are ways of going to places, falling in love with them, doing tons of research, and then almost banging your head against a wall trying to get them protected. Because of Enric Saller's lead, we do it the other way around. We carefully look at scientific goals before we find those targets. We identify them very precisely. We match them up accurately with political opportunity, form up a proper analytical approach with that country as to what they need and our partners. And then when I go in and lead the expedition, it's a pretty good horse to back that we're going to have success there. So it's a vast amount of work in the background before we arrive with an expedition. But we're really getting somewhere. There's quite the appetite now for protected areas, except for, as I say, this potentially disastrous decision being made in the US. Because we're a very unique place because of COVID-19. Now it's headline news. It's the headline news that we would have dreamed of 6 months ago, where people are saying the only vaccine against future pandemics is to protect nature. And then we all see that subtext that says our health is reliant on everybody else's health, which in turn is reliant on nature's health. And I mean, this is the kind of news that we would have been popping champagne corks all over the world if we'd seen that in the press 6 months ago. But now it's actually happening, and it's now down to us to really get behind every decision we can to help make that happen. So it's a game changer, and I think this is a launch pad. I really feel this is a really clear launch pad to make great things happen to protect nature. We have no other choice. So yeah, so that's what we do at Pristine Seas. The approach is to look at the stresses of the ocean, and the stresses of the ocean are what we put in, pollution, what we take out, our extraction, fish and minerals and all the rest, combined with global warming, mean that the very least we can do is to hunt out, explore, and help protect the last wild, truly pristine places. A bit like putting money in the bank.
Absolutely. It seems to us, certainly where we've been in the UK in COVID, everybody's really tuned into nature through the spring, and being able to watch things like the trees going into leaf, or birds nesting and now fledglings being fed by the parents, and you would never have spotted that because you'd never been at home during the daytime to have seen it. So, and obviously a lot of talk about the so-called green recovery as well, and that's very much coming through. But I'm just wondering, from the, I know you work at things like around things like the World Economic Forum, so you're at the very top political table where all the global leaders come together to Davos every year and discuss the state of the world, but very much perhaps from an economic point of view. But I just get a sense of whether you think that the people are at that level are now listening to the economic value of nature in perhaps a way that they weren't before. And it was something that Sylvia said on the call, the webinar this morning, is that nobody's valuing nature. Everything is free. The air that you breathe is free. And I'm just wondering now whether there's a moment where we can start to do, and I hate to use the word environmental economics because I don't think that's necessarily the right way forward. There's an intrinsic value to nature that should not have a pound note or a dollar or a peso or whatever it's attached to it. But do you think that's changing now at places like the World Economic Forum, so that there is an appreciation of what nature does for us, and without nature we will have nothing?
Yes, very much, Geoff. And I was at Davos for the week this year, and I came away really optimistic. I was fired up with the opportunity of listening to the talks. I gave one talk myself on water usage, SDG 14, and there was a sense of smart thinking. I really loved it. I mean, I was blown away by Antonio Guterres' keynote. Ursula von der Leyen's was amazing. Prince Charles, it was worth all of the effort to me just to listen to Prince Charles for his half an hour on the Great Reset, where we're going to go. And in the more detailed technical finance and economic discussions, I loved it because there was a clear message that the smart money is not in fossil fuels. ESG investing is the way to go. That's what, and the language being used, I felt was awesome. I was slightly reticent. I just wondered how the language was going, but it was good. People were listening. And to hear Marco Lambertini, who the general director of WWF, saying we are already at half Earth. When we look to protect more, to get 50% protected by 2050, we can't afford to lose any more now. And, Enric Sarro, Pristine Seas, with the whole thing about protecting the ocean, how we manage the resources. So I came away from Davos feeling that we really are at that moment where people are beginning to understand the true value of nature. But then, like a lot of people, you leave the event, sit back and say, well, what's happening now? What are we going to do now? How do we get our values changed? And for me, this launch pad, events like Davos, is all about helping us reset values. And it's got to be nature first. I really think we've got to have nature first. I think we're crazy to have a school system that keeps kids in classrooms. I think learning outside the classroom should be the absolute norm. And then there will be special cases made for when you should be inside, obviously. But generally, it should be the absolute norm that you learn outside the classroom. Yeah. And I think that's one good step. And the other thing, it helps us sort of reset those values so that at the moment, when people go and invest money, they may or may not wonder if it's environmental, social, or governance investing opportunity. They might want to look first for, is it safe? What are my returns going to be? Or if I buy insurance or buy a car, or a house, or, go for a new job, how many of us ask those values questions? But I can see the day where values are at the top of that list. I can really see the day when someone is looking to be in a position of influence in the community, whether that's teachers or council positions, or politicians looking for big jobs, or people looking to become chief executives of boards, and all these big influential positions. And I can see the day where we would have to declare values first. So right at the top of the form, it would be normal to have your values. And they might be arts, humanities. It could be, you would have to list your actual hands-on, getting your hands dirty at the front line of something. Maybe you volunteered for aid organizations. Maybe you ran soup kitchens, and helped people. Maybe you helped homeless people. But you were literally out there at the front line doing something that was of value to the planet and society. Members of certain activities really in there doing it. And then underneath that would be, you've got an MBA and this is the party you belong to. And it would be exceptional if you tried to vote for somebody that didn't display those values. So, there'd be a big red flashing light. Brr, 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 brr. Do you know you're about to vote someone who's not displayed their values? Or when we go and buy insurance, on her desk would be a little stand-up thing that said, my name's Mary, and these are the values I live by. And I think that's where we're going to head. If people listen to, and I came away with that thought after Davos, and now we're in COVID, I can see the need for that even more. People are going to have to demonstrate values if they want to get somewhere.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. And it's interesting, on Wednesday in the Blue Hope and ADEX Expo conversations, there's a whole day devoted to really innovation and dealing with plastic pollution, which we'll now move on to. And in there, with presentations on scientists who are, for example, looking at mangroves and the impact of plastics on mangroves. So, what's the jargon is ecosystem service, and what do mangroves do for us? And they do a huge amount to protect coastlines as habitats for spawning fish. These are hugely important areas. If they get damaged, they're lost, and the ecosystem damage will be phenomenal, as well as damage to people's lives in terms of on land.
You're absolutely right, Geoff. And that's the crazy thing about, as this morning, that we take clean air for granted. We take, fish for granted. Fish have no value until they're caught and put in a restaurant or in a marketplace. This crazy thinking about the way we look at ecosystem services and nature. And I think it's all about to change. I find it hard to believe that we go through a process as globally impactful as COVID-19 and not come out of it with a more reasonable set of values that are reset for true sustainability and a sense of absolutely engaging the true value of nature within that, obviously,
So in turning to the intractable challenge of plastic pollution, I'm conscious with MPAs, marine protected areas, that plastic will happily drift into these marine protected areas, although you can stop certain activities like fishing or boat traffic or whatever in these areas. Of course, pollution that's wandering around the ocean will know no boundaries. So I'm just going to bring you to a point about kind of when did you first begin to notice that the plastic pollution was actually happening when you were out on your dives or on the coast or whatever it was that you were doing? What was the first moment when you think, hang on a minute, there's something really big going on here?
It was a strange moment for me, Geoff, because I was so enthusiastic about diving, working underwater and leading science expeditions and teaching people to dive, that my first contacts with plastic and general unwanted, obviously, pollution in the sea almost went past me. I would be swimming past an outfall pipe and think, phew, look out for that outfall pipe. There's all kinds coming out of there. And then carry on. Or I'd bump into an abandoned fishing net, a ghost net on the bottom or drifting in the water. And I'd be thinking, be careful around this net. And then all of a sudden, I remember being interviewed on the radio. This seems a long time ago. And I found myself saying that the reporter said, what's changed in your lifetime as a diver? And I found myself saying, there's a lot less fish and a lot more plastic. And as I said it, I thought, yeah, that's right. It was a big awakening. I was stupidly head down, doing the diving, doing the work, getting there. And it sort of became not commonplace that I didn't notice it. I was aware of it all the time, but I didn't stand on it and go, hang on, there's too much plastic here. And from that moment on, I became highly attuned to it. And I feel living a bit of a debris-filled life like you are, Geoff. I've run these debris dives, as we call them. I'm a big supporter of ghost fishing, the great diving team. I've been to, Ljubljana, where they recycle, these vast amounts of ghost fishing nets into beautiful nylon. And I work hard with the UN. I'm the ambassador for the UN Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention, which is the set of conventions that keep persistent organic pollutants and chemicals of all kind under control. And of course, I'm working very hard with Plastic Oceans UK as a way of doing that. But there's just something about, I'm surprised at myself. It almost passed me by, almost like, well, yeah, if you're in a city and a load of vehicles go past, of course they're going to pump out a load of black diesel. And I had that thing in the sea. And then around about, it must be, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, I heard myself saying that on the radio, less fish, more plastic. And it was the big eye-opener when I realised how much was there. And we all did the same. We all reacted, didn't we, to something called the Pacific Garbage Patch. And that story, is there really a new continent being formed out there? Or as it is, and we know now, it's the confluence of currents that keep it together. And it's zillions of pieces there that form up. It's not actually a solid island. Or images where plastic bags are on the front page of National Geographic magazine, and those horrific images from the Marshall Islands of the albatross chicks dead with their stomachs exploded, full of objects that we recognise, bottle tops and cigarette lighters and all that rubbish. So, yeah, it was a really eye-opener. And then I've just put behind me the picture of me there in the Arctic. This was an eye-opener, these Arctic beaches, which in the summer can be quite the challenge normally in a normal time summer, pre-tons of plastic and global warming, because there'd be a bit of fun working out where does the snow and ice on the land finish and where does the sea ice crack begin. So you got to be careful as you're walking out onto the ice, because it will be indistinguishable, really. Super clean, super pristine, with the only thing on mind is don't fall down the crack into the sea. It's okay if you fall down the crack into the land, but is this next crack going to put me in very deep cold water? But now on those same beaches, I find this kind of thing, which are horrible balls of plastic from shipping containers on what I remember as a pristine beach. And, I've got thousands of pictures like this, and a lot of the pictures aren't as dramatic as that, but when you get close, you can see all the usual things that we see on temperate zone beaches, flip-flops, bits of plastic everywhere. So this was a real eye-opener.
So it's interesting, obviously having been, say, attuned to this for, say, the last 20 years or so, kind of what may still shock you. I mean, I from my perspective, I've been involved with this issue probably for about 8 or 9 years. And the revelation that there was plastic in the air in our cities, and we were breathing it in, was quite a revelation. It's like, I never thought of that. But has that side of things, is that the most shocking thing that you've seen? I mean, obviously in diving terms, I'm sure you've seen entanglements and ghost nets and so on like that. But I mean, can you just, for someone who's been around this for a little while now, just to bring this to life for our viewers, what continues to shock you and therefore drive you into the advocacy and action that we'll get on to in a moment?
Well, I've got a new shock coming up that I haven't witnessed yet, and that's myself. I've agreed to have my body burden checked. So I go to a laboratory in Scandinavia, and I'm a bit surprised. They take quite a lot of blood. They take about half a litre of blood. And from that, there's a lot of complex analysis. And that analysis will tell me how many chemicals and what particular type of chemicals I have in me. So, from PCBs to lead to nanoparticles of all kinds, mercury. So I'm looking forward to this, and I agreed 100%. I said, yes, let's do it, because that'll help me communicate this issue. But now it's getting closer. I've started to get just a little bit worried. What does happen when you find out what your own body burden is? So that's going to be one shock. And aside from my own upcoming shock, it was those images in Blue Planet, the recent one with the whale with the bucket, the blue bucket going in and out of that whale's mouth. I mean, the power of that image is just something. It just blew me away. And I looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And I know I've seen I've seen loads of fish tangled up in ghost nets. I've spent time trying to get fish out of ghost nets. And You know, it's a horrific thing, but it was something about that image on Blue Planet with that whale with this big blue bucket in its mouth. And I found it totally horrifying. And who can forget, I mean, National Geographic, again, on the front cover, we had the plastic bag, sort of shaped a bit like an iceberg, and the other one with the bird that's caught in that clear plastic bag. Horrific thing, absolutely horrific. So, you know, we all know that it's time to do something. And I'm just hoping that this COVID-19 will add something about momentum. Funny thing is, I thought that when was it, Geoff? I think it was 2018, when it was discovered that nanoparticles cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
He discovered it in fish first. So this was definitive, indisputable, accurate proof that nanoparticles are in the blood-brain barrier. It's obviously in us. It's in our food chain, so therefore it must be affecting human health. I was about to go off and have champagne when I first got that news, because I remember thinking, wow, what amazing news. This is going to motivate us to really act. But unfortunately, it didn't. Nothing really changed about that. It all seemed a bit abstract, oddly enough. But I think now COVID-19 is with us and we're reacting to that, combined with what we already know. I think we're, you know, as shocking as all this has been, it hasn't led to change. But now a global pandemic really has. And, you know, let's keep our fingers crossed we really can use it to be a bit smarter.
Yes. And obviously as we move, you know, hopefully the world begins to recover and respond to the COVID pandemic in a way that, you know, obviously people are still dying. This is an incredibly sad and tragic time for many people at the moment, but we have to have that sort of hope that we can do something about this, particularly about plastic and the pollution piece. That, you know, there is some of this is actually in our control. And I'm just, as we sort of come to a close, and if you want to send in questions as we get to the end of the conversation, please do. We'll bring those to life. But, you know, in your role as a broadcaster and presenter, you know, what's the messages that you're trying to communicate to, you know, it could be business and companies, and you've already mentioned the sustainability and governance issues around business, but particularly to, let's say, consumers in terms of what responsibility, you know, we all have, because plastic is in our lives. It brings, you know, some amazing benefits, not least medically, and we're seeing a lot of that at the moment with the COVID pandemic. But of course, that then leads to extra consumption of plastics as well. So the recycling of plastics and how we can also try and minimise plastics in our lives and get to more reuse models. So what sort of things are in your mind when you talk to audiences or putting together your programmes that you're trying to get across about how we do solve this problem? Because, you know, the Blue Hope campaign is very much about value the ocean, but let's try and stop plastic pollution, particularly at source. So what would your messages be on what's our role in all this?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Geoff. My messages are always about purchasing and voting, because, you know, we're smart purchasers these days, aren't we? It's very easy to do a little bit of research. So if you're thinking about buying a different kind of insurance or particular car, or buy services from a provider, or, you know, buy food or whatever it might be, it's easy to find out how it's packaged, how it's made, is it recycled or not, and all of those things that matter to us. And no one needs a list. You just think, well, yeah, this makes sense. This is good. These are good principles. So not only should we be asking those questions about everything, and I do mean everything, why not ask those questions about who's providing your transport, where your energy comes from, you know, who are your children's school teachers, what are their values? I think it's time for us as consumers to ask questions of everybody before we engage with anybody. Someone comes and paints your house, why not ask them what they do with the paint that they left over? You know, someone comes and, you know, cleans your car, one of those home cleaning car valet services, why not ask them what they use and where all the water goes and what goes washing down your drains? So I think we must ask those questions and develop that habit again and again and again. And now we do see it, don't we? People do ask questions in restaurants about fish. Where does this fish come from? Is it on the list? People have it on the phone app and all these. And we're getting used to asking those questions. But I think we need to broaden that across every single thing we do. And what that will do, that will reinforce the thing that we all hear, is that every decision we make makes a difference. Every single item that you handle carefully or wrongly has an effect on the global outcome. And then if we go through that as our normal way of living, then we should also think about how we vote. So instead of just looking at people who are standing for positions of influence with their politics and economic and other promises, we need to interrogate their values very carefully and make our decisions based on that first, and let that be known. So it's every decision we make is a positive or a negative influence. We do that by asking the questions about every engagement we have, and then remember voting, because we're smart. And people who want to be in positions of decision making and influential position, they know that if we're asking those questions, they absolutely have to display smart values.
Yeah, and in relation to many of the countries that are critically linked to the most sensitive oceans areas, many of those countries don't have the facilities to do the recycling and how they are able to get stop the material getting out into the environment in the first place, but then also start to regain the value. So what do you think the countries so that are the G7, the G12 and so on, which have stronger economies, are able to do to help those other countries that don't have those waste management facilities? And obviously we talked this morning on the call about waste exports that were being sent from countries like Canada and the UK and Australia to Asian countries. Obviously, China has now stopped the material being imported, same as Malaysia, and the same countries also. So there's a dependency here about how we help those countries that don't have those facilities also deal with it. And I'm wondering, under your sort of World Economic Forum activities, whether that's something that you're trying to promote to those better off countries, to help those countries, because at the end of the day, we've only got one ocean. No matter where the pollution goes in, it's going in somewhere, and it's going to affect us directly or indirectly.
Exactly, Geoff, because it's an economic and an ethical question that's as clear as can be in my eyes, is that there is only one ocean, there's only one planet and one global ecosystem. So the whole idea is that you can't possibly run away in one country with some great economic push and expect another country to be dealing with the rubbish as if it is not connected. Of course it is, and COVID has shown us that our health is reliant on everyone else's health, is reliant on nature. So I think my first response is that at the moment, in this extraordinary COVID situation, we've got entire economies that are based on ecotourism, and that has gone completely flat. So that some communities are bumping along the bottom, struggling, and that exposes the protected area they're looking after. So we should pay for it. It can't be too complicated to work out that if you're going to see the gorillas or go dive with sharks this year and spend, say, $4,000, somebody could quickly work out that though that local community that looks after it would get a few hundred, then send a few hundred to them. Keep that community going. Keep that region protected. We should be doing that fast. We should be doing that right now. And ethically, I noticed how many companies, how many wealthy individuals are making billions during this period. If you want a lesson, just quickly search online for trillions made by billionaires in COVID. And the numbers are crazy, trillions made by billionaires. Type it into Google, see what you get. It's amazing the amount of money that's been made in the past couple of months because of COVID and the very volatile markets that are around it. These smart people, they know exactly where to put their money. So ethically, how is it we don't have international enforcement and agreement on these values? Say, you made this much during COVID, therefore that goes to prevent it happen again. Dead simple.
Yeah, no, I like the logic, Paul, and I'm sure people will be on their internet search engines now looking for precisely those pieces. We're coming to the end of our time together, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I was just going to give you a final word, really, which is, we in the Blue Hope campaign, obviously it's focusing on plastic pollution, and we are looking ahead during World Oceans Day and the rest of this week to a range of perspectives on the issue of our ocean, and it's brought the whole thing to life. But with our International Decade of the Ocean that's coming up, starting in 2021, I just want to give us a quick view as to what your aspirations are. You mentioned about the targets of marine protected areas, but as we head in towards that in this post-COVID world, what do you think we should be aiming to get together and achieve in that 10 years? Because we have to. What would your aspiration for us be?
Well, it's very achievable because we're almost at the end of illegal fishing now because of satellite technology and something called the Port State Measures Agreement. We now don't just actually watch every single fishing vessel at sea, but we can prosecute them. So we get this complicated, seemingly impossible legal situation of a Panamanian registered vessel crewed by Vietnamese crew and fishing in British waters and trying to sell the fish in Valparaiso, Chile. Well, it's too complicated, but now we are actually prosecuting it. So I think within 10 years, easily, you and I will be drinking champagne because we'll have recognised at the very end of illegal fishing. And similarly with pollution and dumping in the sea. You know, we're getting smart now. I was here in Geneva, part of the UN team, when the plastics was agreed in the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention as being a recognised persistent organic pollutant. It seems crazy, but the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention is all about chemicals. And but for their work, we'd all be living in a sort of global out of control chemical experiment. So all these chemicals were listed, but not plastic, because plastic is made up of lots of chemicals. But that finally came into law in Geneva in June. So now companies and governments can be prosecuted if a ship or container load of plastics is sent somewhere where they can't reprocess it. You know, there's this prior informed consent where if you sign up to receive all this PET that you think you're going to recycle, and you open the doors of the container, it turns out to be something else, you can send it back. And that's now enforced by the customs authorities and Interpol. So I think within the next 10 years, we're going to see the end of illegal fishing and the end of most of our plastic dumping in the sea. And hopefully we really will see an end to undersea drilling for oil and undersea mining. We have no idea what to do with undersea mining at the moment. And the call for the moratorium is a very smart thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to definitely want to share your optimism for that, Paul. You're obviously in those circles of conversations that are happening right now, and it's good to know that plastic is something that a lot of NGOs have been campaigning for over the last 4 or 5 years. Is plastic to be considered a toxic material, and it's obviously getting enshrined in regulation is hugely important for that international governance that you mentioned, the ESG going forward. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you, albeit in lockdown. I wish we were in a virtual pub or bar at the moment, but we're clearly not. But first of all, thank you for your time today, because this is your second contribution to the Blue Hope campaign. So that's really appreciated, lending your support behind what we're all trying to do here. I'd also like to thank ADEX for the platform, for the webinar, and the partners, the British High Commission in Malaysia and Mura and Plastic Oceans for lending their support to get this campaign rolling. And we wish you all the very best, Paul. Stay safe. We hope that you're able to do lots more designations of marine protected areas from the safety of your apartment in Geneva. But I hope you get diving before too long. I'm sure, like many people, they wish to be out, and maybe this green recovery, or the blue recovery, as perhaps we should be calling it, maybe the spur to take this decade for the oceans on. So for me, thank you so much for your time, and we'll close the webinar now. Good luck, everyone. And do tune into further webinars, including the Plastic Oceans film being shown later this afternoon, UK time, this evening in Malaysia time, and the webinars over the next 2 or 3 days. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.